Okay, this seems like a reasonable question. Let's talk about how asylum seekers finance their journeys to safety. So you've heard £6,000 for the journey. I've heard anything from £20,000 to £1,000 to a few £100s. You might have heard all sorts of things. The truth is that it really depends a huge amount. So the first thing to remember is that refugees have totally different experiences, but nobody's refugee journey begins in France. So let's go back to the beginning, right? There are all sorts of different people who become refugees. For example, you might be essentially middle class and be part of a movement for democracy against a dictatorship government, or just a member of an opposition party, and then the country falls further away from democracy and it becomes illegal to be part of the opposition party, and people who have been part of that party start being rounded up and detained and tortured, that kind of thing. At that point, you might realize that it's becoming more and more unsafe for you to remain in the country. You might have a bit of time and certainly the resources to arrange for your flight. In the best case scenario, ironically, what you might be able to do in that case is to pay enough, which is very expensive, to get falsified documents in order to be able to make an escape by plane to get out of the country and directly to a country of safety. But for a lot of people, that won't be the case. So then there's other circumstances, for example, like you might have just lost everything. Your house might have been bombed out, and you might have escaped just literally with the clothes on your back. It might be a different circumstance if you are somebody who has found out, like, they're coming to forcibly recruit you to the Taliban tonight. So you need to get your son out of the house tonight and into hiding. Get him out right now, get him away. That might happen. So there's also the difference there between whether you are forced to flee as a family unit, as the entire family, or whether one member of your family has been targeted and you're going to have to manage to get them out in order to get them away to safety. So then in most cases, what you're doing is in the initial stage of flight, you are escaping just to a situation of hiding. Now that could be a camp just across the border where you hope you won't be identified, or it could be literally staying in hiding with not leaving the house and trying to arrange the next leg of your journey. And again, the next leg depends on your resources and what you need. So in many cases at that point, when people are in hiding, if they're in a family unit, they will say, okay, the rest of the family will stay in hiding and we will send one person on ahead. They will make a journey to find a place where we can actually live, and they will then send for the rest of the family, and the rest of the family will stay in relative danger, but also in a situation where they are physically safe as long as they don't come to the attention of the authorities, and wait for the family member that they've sent on to give them work. And so that, of course, means that all of the family's resources can be pooled into paying a smuggler to take that one family member across a further border. Now, look, there are some families for whom even that much is impossible. That means that the person that they want to send on will have to work, probably in a hidden way because they're already in hiding. Arguably, they could find work in exploitation among the smugglers. They could be in forced labour and get into debts right from the outset. Or else the family might be able to scrape together maybe a few £1,000s. And in most cases, that will just pay to send that person on the next leg of the journey. So I'm imagining, say, you're escaping Sudan. The first step might be to somewhere like Egypt. The next step might be into Tunisia in the hope of getting to Libya, to Italy, or if you're escaping from Iran or Syria, maybe you've got to Turkey. Next step is to get across the Mediterranean. And again, how much you're able to pay is going to impact your journey at every stage. So if you need to cross the desert, in the Sahara Desert, in order to get to North Africa from sub-Saharan Africa, the difference between paying to be in a Jeep or paying to be clinging to the back of a truck, if you only have a few $100s in order to pay the smuggler, that will be the difference of like a huge degree of safety of your journey. So then along the way, again, if you had the resources up front, you may have been able to pay for the full journey up front. But in many cases, you might have to stop. You might have to find work. You might hope that during the time when you were traveling from the first leg, your family's been able to get in touch with another uncle, another cousin, somebody who you already know, who's already in the country that you're hoping to reach, who has resources, who's been able to lend them to you to help you continue your flight. And so bit by bit, either by working or by relying on networks of support from family and friends, you will pay more or less to make each leg of the journey. And at every single stage of that journey, most people will stay and stop. So either because they can't afford to carry on or because they don't want to carry on any further. So at every single stage along this journey, fewer and fewer people are making it. So once you've crossed the desert, then you have to cross the Mediterranean. Once you cross the Mediterranean, you have to make your way undetected through Europe. In every single country in Europe, more people stop than continue. And in a very small minority, make it all the way to the Channel. And at that point, in order to cross the Channel, it also depends on your resources. So maybe you're going to be stuck in the Channel region in northern France for quite a while, either trying to get together some money from working here and there, wherever you can find a very exploitative thing that you can do, whether that's for the smugglers in terms of forced labour, that you are paying off the debt, or whether that's, other types of under-the-counter work. Or else at that stage, maybe you've managed to get in touch with somebody, persuade somebody to lend you some more money in order to make that last leg of your journey. And then the cost of crossing the channel, that can vary immensely as well. And again, there's this element of you're getting what you pay for. So to be clear, any journey in a small vessel across the channel is incredibly dangerous. And there is absolutely no guarantee that you will get what you paid for, because obviously you're dealing with an illegal trade facilitated by smugglers. But in theory, you could pay anything from like several £1,000s for a more seaworthy vessel that hasn't been used before, that has like an actual floor of the vessel, and that has fewer people on board it, and that comes with, say, a life jacket that is, up to standard. And then the less that you're able to pay goes down the scale of safety. So at the extreme end, you have smugglers who will pile many too many people onto a boat, but each of them is paying much less because they can't afford to pay more. And they don't even have proper life jackets and so on, any kind of safety equipment. And then even on those boats, sometimes the most vulnerable person of all will be the person whose hand is on the tiller, because sometimes in some cases when if somebody cannot afford to pay for the crossing, the smuggler, because let's be clear, no smuggler ever gets onto one of these boats, so the smuggler might force somebody to say, okay, for a reduction in your fare or to go across for free, you have to steer the boat through the night, you have to steer it to the UK. And the reason that's important to bring up is because in the UK we've started to prosecute people who we have drone footage of them with their hand on the tiller on those small boats crossing the channel, because we say they're a smuggler, when in fact, of course, they might in fact be the most vulnerable person on a boat full of extremely vulnerable asylum seekers. Overall, I know this has gone on a little, but I hope that it goes some way to explain the sort of huge variation in experiences of what it is to be a refugee. Ultimately, a refugee is just a human being, and the only reason why they are denied the ability to travel safely is not always just because they can't afford it, or if they saved or got their family to scrape together their savings, couldn't afford a flight. It's because we do not offer them the opportunity to apply for a visa, and you need the visa in order to get on a flight. You need that paperwork, and that is extremely expensive and difficult to get forged, and we do not give it to people who are seeking asylum at all. In many cases, these journeys don't just take weeks, they take months, they might even take years before somebody actually reaches a place of safety where they can rebuild. And all along that journey, all they're hoping for is a place where they are safe and where there are opportunity, like we do have in the UK and we can offer to people.